The A-10, honestly, this plane is something else. Could this plane be the most successful military aircraft ever built in terms of longevity, effectiveness, cost, durability? It's got to be up there. Like, if it's not the best, it's got to be like top three. I think this plane is almost 60 years old. Like, legit. I think this plane's been around since the 70s, no? Or maybe even earlier. And it is still so effective. Like, the design, whoever designed this plane, honestly, I hope they got some kind of award. Man, it's so menacing.
Every time U.S. military media runs another story about retiring the A-10 Thunderbolt II, its fans crack a knowing smile, fully aware that rumors of this attack aircraft's death have been greatly exaggerated. And this has been happening for not just years, but decades. An aircraft created at the height of the Cold War as a highly specialized tool for destroying armored vehicles has survived the collapse of the Soviet Union, multiple wars in the Middle East, several generations of combat aviation, and even the arrival of stealth fifth-generation fighters. What's more, it was in the 21st century that the Warthog's value to the U.S. military proved unexpectedly durable. The A-10 was born in an era when Washington was preparing to stop Soviet tank armies in Europe, yet it continues to live on in a world where war has become hybrid, prolonged, and politically inconvenient.
That's the thing, it's seen so many changes, you know, from tanks to drones to cyber warfare, and it's still around.
A machine many considered obsolete as early as the 2000s still maintains its own niche in places where modern multi-role aircraft are either too expensive or simply poorly suited for prolonged troop support over the battlefield. And while the Pentagon and the U.S. Air Force once again try to close the chapter known as the Warthog, history itself seems unwilling to put a period at the end of that sentence, almost as if it's warming up its engines for participation in a war with Iran, where densely populated plains, endless salt deserts, and fortified positions of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps look almost like a purpose-built training ground for the A-10.
Wow.
But can an aircraft that's about to hit the half-century mark become a decisive American asset in a war with Iran? Let's find out in today's video.
So it's 50 years old. That's still pretty old for an aircraft, like a military aircraft, right? I can't think of many other ones. Maybe the C-130. I'm trying to think of any other planes that the military uses that are that old.
The story of the A-10, better known to the public as the Warthog, didn't begin with a beautiful engineering vision. It began as an answer to a very specific military problem that emerged after Vietnam and in the middle of a rapidly intensifying Cold War. The U.S. military increasingly realized it needed a dedicated CAS aircraft, close air support, not one that could simply fly over the battlefield at speed, but one that could deliberately stay over it, accurately engage enemy ground targets, absorb serious damage, and remain close to friendly ground forces at the very moment they needed help the most. To meet that need, the Attack Experimental Program, or AX, was launched in December 1966, and a little later, the final requirements for the future aircraft were formalized. Fairchild Republic won the competition, and by the spring of 1976, the first A-10 had officially entered service with Tactical Air Command.
Wow, 76, so bang on 50 years.
From the very beginning, the A-10 was built around the ideas of survivability and firepower. Even today, despite every attempt to send the aircraft into retirement, the U.S. Air Force regularly emphasizes its outstanding controllability at low speeds and low altitudes, its ability to loiter for long periods right in the middle of the action, and its capacity to operate in the harshest conditions. To make that possible, designers protected the cockpit and part of the flight control system with 1,200 pounds of titanium aircraft armor, commonly known as the bathtub. It's repeatedly been tested for resistance to 23mm cannon fire and indirect hits from fragments of 57mm shells, and it consists of titanium plates ranging from 0.5 to 1.5 inches thick.
So the pilot he's protected. Like, there's a lot, like, there's a thick, that bathtub thing is strong.
The armor alone accounts for nearly 6% of the empty weight of the Warthog. In addition to the armor, all inner surfaces of the bathtub that directly surround the pilot are covered with a multi-layer nylon spall liner to protect against shell fragments. A dual redundant hydraulic flight control system, a mechanical backup in the event of hydraulic failure, and the fact that the A-10 was designed to keep flying even with one engine, one elevator, half the tail, and half of one wing missing, all allow the pilot to get out of even the worst situation imaginable.
How is that possible to fly with one engine and one wing? Like, how does it stay like flat and not just like dipping?
The Warthog's engines were designed with rough field takeoff and landing in mind, which is why they received their unusual high-mounted placement to reduce the risk of damage from foreign objects. They can continue running during servicing and rearming by ground crews, significantly reducing downtime, and their exhaust is directed toward the tail assembly, helping shield them from detection by infrared-guided surface-to-air missiles.
Okay.
Another layer of protection comes from the fact that all 4 fuel tanks were placed close to the center of the aircraft and separated from the fuselage. That means an enemy round first has to penetrate the skin of the A-10 before it can even reach the outer wall of the fuel tank. But even then, things are not so simple. Damaged fuel lines are self-sealing.
How?
If the damage exceeds the sealing capacity of a tank, check valves prevent fuel from flowing into the damaged tank, and because most of the fuel system's components are located inside the tanks themselves, failure of those components does not automatically lead to fuel loss. The refueling system is also purged after use, while reticulated polyurethane foam covers the inner and outer areas of the fuel tanks, trapping debris and limiting fuel leakage in the event of damage.
Whoever designed this, honestly, they designed this thing in the 70s, before all of these fancy computer programs, CAD. They probably drew this thing by hand, used slide rules. It's incredible.
On top of that, engineers separated the engines from the rest of the airframe with firewalls and firefighting equipment, so even if all 4 main fuel tanks are lost, the 2 self-sealing collector tanks still retain enough fuel for 230 miles, enough to bring the Warthog safely home.
Yeah, for sure.
After the end of the Cold War, it seemed that the A-10's era had ended along with the disappearance of its primary adversary, but history had other plans. During the Gulf War, the aircraft got a second life. After its combat debut in the skies over Iraq, the Warthog became one of the most effective air platforms for destroying enemy armored vehicles, artillery, and supply columns. During Operation Desert Storm, 144 A-10s from the 354th Wing flew more than 8,100 sorties, destroying 987 Iraqi tanks, 926 artillery systems, and 1,355 military vehicles.
Those tanks must have been like sitting ducks, because by the time they can turn the cannon on the tank, the A-10 is probably like 100 miles, away.
They also scored several aerial kills, including a German-built Bo-105 helicopter and a Soviet-designed Mi-8 HIP, both shot down with bursts from the GAU-8. Those results permanently cemented the Thunderbolt II's reputation as a tank buster, while repeated cases of these aircraft returning home with punctured fuel tanks and damaged flying surfaces helped create the cult of A-10 survivability. Its subsequent combat use from Kosovo to Libya showed that the aircraft is especially effective where the enemy is dangerous, but lacks layered long-range air defense. Its subsonic speed gave the pilot 5 to 7 minutes of loiter time over the target, while the 30mm depleted uranium rounds fired by the GAU-8 Avenger solved problems right here, right now. After the infamous events of September 11th, the Warthog became relevant once again. In Afghanistan, its speed characteristics matched the operational rhythm of JTACs, Joint Terminal Attack Controllers, almost perfectly. Thanks to its subsonic speed of roughly 370 miles per hour and the ability to loiter over a target for up to an hour and a half on internal fuel alone, A-10s remained on hand exactly as long as JTAC needed to issue a full 9 line.
Wow, so they were able to stay in the air long enough to keep the enemy from doing anything, just their presence alone.
The aircraft could make a pass, immediately retask, and come back around again without peeling off for refueling. That's why pilots often joke that the Warthog and the JTAC literally breathed in the same rhythm. In Iraq in 2003, the attack aircraft filled the gap between the AH-64 Apache attack helicopters and F-15E Strike Eagle fighters. And in Syria from 2015 to 2019, the A-10 became a textbook example of cash and carry CAS, cheap, immediate support at the level of patrol and checkpoint skirmishes with hostile forces. Over the years, the Warthog's combat loadout and technological package changed dramatically. With the A-10C upgrade and the 2005 to 2007 Precision Engagement Program, the Warthog received GPS INS navigation, color multifunction displays, support for JDAM and laser JDAM munitions, and Lightning AT and Sniper XR targeting pods.
What does it cost to build one of these from the ground up compared to something like the F-35? Because I think the F-35 is really expensive. I think it's like 150 million or something like that. Something really, really expensive. This one's got to be a lot cheaper. But how much cheaper?
A later modernization package, Suite 10, which began deployment in 2020, added the military tactical data link, Link 16, and full integration of APKWS-2 AGR-20A guided 70mm rockets, ideally suited for dealing with drones and light armored vehicles. Speaking of other upgrades, it'd be impossible not to mention the new Core Processor 4, which adds digital mapping algorithms and an improved HOTAS architecture, Thunder Edge wings, whose composite construction reduced aircraft weight by around 350 pounds and extended total service life to 12,000 flight hours, the ability to exchange data with MQ-4C Triton reconnaissance drones and E-7 Wedgetail airborne early warning aircraft, which in turn can help cue A-10s onto targets, and the ability, following testing in 2025, to carry 4 GBU-39s instead of the previous 2.
Nice. In
this way, the Warthog moved closer to multi-role status without betraying its two fundamental defining traits, the titanium bathtub and the 30mm GAU-8 cannon.
Why is there such a pressure to retire the A-10? If it's still effective, why are there people that are so eager to retire it? Because it's just going to cost more money to replace all of these A-10s. Why not just keep the A-10s, in operation?
The most persistent wave of attempts to force the A-10 into retirement began in 2014. After that, the U.S. Air Force repeatedly tried to shut down the fleet, citing budget pressure and the transition to stealth fighters like the F-35 Lightning II.
But why, though?
But Congress repeatedly blocked the most radical plans. In the NDAA for 2026, lawmakers limited the retirement to 59 aircraft, preserving at least 103 Warthogs in service. The key arguments in favor of that decision were the cost per flight hour, around $11,116 for the A-10C versus roughly $18,000 to $23,000 for the F-35, which translates into major savings for American taxpayers over hundreds of sorties.
Exactly. I don't understand it. Why are they so eager to spend more money? It doesn't make any sense unless they just want to justify, spending the money. Maybe they get to keep some of the money.
The 10 to 15 year capability gap that would exist before the A-10 could be fully replaced by swarms of loyal wingman drones, given the need for extensive testing and years of infrastructure build-out, while the existing alternative in the form of attack helicopters remains too vulnerable to man-pads in modern war. And the National Guard connection, 84 A-10Cs are assigned to the Air National Guard, forming a third echelon of fire support that can be rapidly deployed overseas, making it worthwhile to keep the Warthog alive from a mobilization planning standpoint. The Iran scenario of 2026 added yet another ace up the attack aircraft sleeve, because the A-10 is almost ideal in both risk profile and operating costs for a medium-intensity war in which the United States needs the capacity to suppress hundreds of pinpoint targets every single day. In the event of escalation with Iran, the potential theater of operations breaks down into 3 logically connected zones. First is the southwestern coastal lowland of Khuzestan, the heart of oil refining and dense urban agglomerations. Behind it rises the Zagros mountain chain like a wall, with narrow passes reaching up to 9,800 feet, and in the center of the country stretches a high desert plateau where ballistic missile silos and airfields are hidden.
Americans watching this, and not just Americans, anyone watching this, what do you think about this whole Iran war? Do you think it's justified? Are you happy with how it's going? Do you think that the money being spent on this war is worth it? What are your general thoughts? Just want to hear what you guys have to say.
Those contrasts also shape Iran's patchwork air defense network. At least 4 battalions of long-range S-300 PMU-2 systems protect nuclear facilities, while 29 Russian-supplied TOR-M1 mobile short-range SAM systems and Iranian RAD-2 batteries fill the gaps. And the A-10 would have to operate inside virtually every one of those pockets. The main threat to the attack aircraft would be the mobile TOR-M1, while an A-10 diving to an altitude of 1,000 to 2,000 feet may be able to exit the engagement zone in 22 to 25 seconds. Any mistake would mean ejection over hostile territory with a high risk of capture. On the other hand, if an F-35 or a decoy drone forces a TOR battery to turn on its radar, the A-10 could pop out of a terrain fold and, at an altitude of around 1,000 feet, solve the problem with either a burst from the 30mm cannon or a pair of GBU-54s. The second obvious threat would be loitering munitions and kamikaze drones, because in the air the A-10 would have to solve two tasks at once: shoot down incoming UAVs and strike ground targets. A possible counter would be carrying 2 or 3 pods of APKWS-2 guided rockets, but that would significantly reduce the aircraft's cannon and JDAM load, while also increasing dependence on tankers due to reduced space for additional fuel tanks. So handing control of such dense traffic, strike aircraft and tankers alike, over to E-2D airborne early warning aircraft, which themselves would have to remain in the air for longer, does not...
What are these things here? Are they like, are they for radar?
...sound especially attractive for the United States. Based on U.S. Department of Defense reimbursable rates for FY 2025, in a typical 90-day campaign with 100 strike sorties per day, the difference between the A-10 and the nearest multi-role aircraft in its cost bracket would save the budget around $50 million on fuel and routine maintenance alone.
Wow.
If that's not an argument for keeping an aging fleet of A-10s alive, then it's hard to imagine what is.
Honestly, like, it just doesn't make any sense. You know, there's so much money that like could be spent on other things. Why do we need to spend it on upgrading something that's already working?
A typical operational month in a campaign against Iran, if the Warthog enters the fight, could look like this. Days 1 through 3, precision strikes against radar centers to blind long-range air defenses and open corridors. Days 4 through 10, A-10s enter from island bases in Kuwait, suppress IRGC speedboats in the Strait of Hormuz, and provide cover for Marine forces. Days 11 through 20, redeployment to shortened rough strips closer to Zagros, followed by 6 to 7 hours of concealed overwatch above Abrams convoys. Days 21 through 30, transition to hunting Fata 313 launchers on the plateau and supporting special operations raids against Iranian ballistic missile depots. What's particularly interesting is that RAND, in its combat modeling, calculated that if the daily work of the A-10 can reduce the number of mobile launches by 70%, then missile attacks against CENTCOM bases drop to just a couple of salvos per day.
Wow.
So can the Warthog truly become a decisive American asset in a war with Iran?
Absolutely.
The answer lies in the formula of cost, precision, and survivability. The A-10 will not break Iranian defenses by itself, but it does convert intelligence into close air support better than almost any other air asset at an acceptable level of risk and cost. Ironically, the supposedly outdated A-10 has once again turned out not to be an anachronism, but a very functional instrument of 21st century warfare.
Absolutely. Let's keep it then. Anybody who's like really familiar with the military and how it works, can you explain to me why there is so much pressure to retire the A-10? Like, because to me, it just doesn't make any sense. This plane has repeatedly shown itself to be effective in multiple theaters of war. Why do we need to spend billions and billions of dollars upgrading it? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I'm guessing the pressure's probably coming from the manufacturers who would build the replacements, because obviously that pays for them and their jobs, etc. But just based on the needs of the country, it just doesn't seem like you need to replace the A-10. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed it, please check out this video right here. See you there.